Yes, my friends, Sunday started off hot behind the scenes for the Los Angeles Rams. We need to talk about some key players and how they can help the offense in 2026. Man, the Rams need to reach the Super Bowl this year. I'll admit, I'm excited, and I'm also very confident. The Rams have made some great decisions and signings, and we have everything it takes to get there. The only thing missing is finalizing a deal with Aaron Donald. Once that happens, we'll be even stronger. But we'll leave that topic for the next few days. I hope I'll be able to bring you some good updates on him. Before we get into today's topic, make sure you've already hit the like button. But only do that if you're a true LA Rams fan. Man, there are people here who were attending games back in the 1960s. That's incredible. If possible, write this: I'm Rams until I die. It's amazing to see this love being passed down from generation to generation. Now, let's get to what matters. I want to start by talking about the tight ends. The reason this discussion is gaining so much importance is simple. Suddenly, the Rams find themselves with a roster full of options at this position. And the biggest question heading into next season isn't whether these players can contribute. The question is how the coaching staff will manage to distribute snaps among all of them. Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, Terrence Ferguson, and Max Klare bring different skill sets to the team. When analyzing how these players were used and where they lined up on the field, a much more interesting picture begins to emerge. Instead of viewing them simply as traditional tight ends competing for the same role, the numbers suggest that the Rams may have different types of tight ends capable of filling a variety of roles within the offense. This distinction is important. A traditional inline tight end, often referred to as a 1Y tight end, typically lines up next to the offensive tackle on the line of scrimmage. A move tight end, on the other hand, can line up in multiple spots within the formation, in the slot, in the backfield, split wide, or moving before the snap. The more versatile the player, the more possibilities the offense can create. When analyzing last season's alignment data, some surprising trends begin to appear. The first thing that stands out is the impact of Tyler Higbee's absence in 8 games. Naturally, his absence created opportunities for the other players in the group, resulting in a significant number of snaps for several athletes. Colby Parkinson led the group with a total of 757 snaps. Davis Allen was right behind him with 665. Terrence Ferguson recorded 415. Higbee, despite appearing in only 11 games, totaled 424 snaps. These numbers immediately tell an important story. Parkinson and Allen handled a considerable workload while Higbee was unavailable, and that experience could significantly influence the dynamics of the Rams' tight end group moving forward. Looking deeper into the alignment data reveals even more. Parkinson was heavily utilized as an inline tight end. Out of his total workload, 657 snaps came lined up next to the tackle. He saw limited usage in the slot and out wide, reinforcing the idea that he served as the primary traditional tight end in many situations. Higbee also spent most of his time in line, although he showed a little more flexibility in terms of outside alignment compared to Parkinson. But the player who generated some of the most interesting discussion was Davis Allen. Many fans probably would not expect Allen's usage profile based on simply watching games. Yet, the numbers reveal a player who was moved around frequently throughout the offense. Allen lined up 66 times in the backfield. He added approximately 455 inline snaps. He also spent time in the slot and lined up wide. That level of deployment suggests the coaching staff viewed him as much more than a standard tight end. He was asked to perform multiple functions depending on formation and situation. The backfield number, in particular, stands out. For many observers, seeing a tight end line up in the backfield that often may come as a surprise. Yet it demonstrates a willingness by the Rams to create versatility through personnel movement. Rather than keeping Allen attached to the line on every snap, they utilized him in different locations to create flexibility. The discussion also highlighted how productive Allen was as a blocker and how that could impact his future role. Even though his target totals were not especially high, his overall contribution appears to have extended beyond receiving production. His involvement in the run game and his ability to execute different assignments may help explain why he received so many opportunities. Then there is Terrence Ferguson. His alignment profile looks significantly different from the others. Of his 415 total snaps, roughly half came from slot and wide alignments according to the discussion. That usage paints the picture of a player operating more like a receiving threat than a traditional inline tight end. And then comes perhaps the most eye-opening statistic of the entire conversation. Ferguson's average depth of target was listed at 18.6 yards. That number towers above the rest of the group. Parkinson's average depth of target was 4.4 yards. Allen's was 3.9. Hybe checked in at 5.9. Ferguson, meanwhile, was sitting at 18.6. The contrast is dramatic. While the others primarily worked underneath or in short areas of the field, Ferguson was being targeted much farther downfield. The discussion even suggested that some of those deeper opportunities resembled targets that otherwise might have gone elsewhere within the offense. Regardless of interpretation, the statistic itself is impossible to ignore. An 18.6-yard average depth of target indicates a player being used to challenge defenses vertically, rather than simply functioning as a short yardage option. That creates a different dimension within the tight end room. Now enter the newest addition, Max Klare. When comparing the current Rams tight ends with Clare's final collegiate season discussed during the roundtable, some fascinating similarities appeared. Clare lined up 44 times in the backfield. He recorded approximately 230 inline snaps. He spent about 160 snaps in the slot. He lined up roughly 50 times out wide. His alignment distribution immediately drew comparisons to Davis Allen because of the versatility reflected in those numbers. But the conversation did not stop there. Clare's average depth of target was listed at 7.1 yards. That places him in a different category than Allen and Parkinson, while still remaining well below Ferguson's deep threat profile. Perhaps even more intriguing were his receiving statistics. Clare produced 43 receptions for 448 yards. That works out to an average of 10.4 yards per catch. When comparing that production to the 7.1-yard average depth of target, one conclusion emerged from the discussion. Clare was generating significant yardage after the catch. The numbers suggest a player capable of creating additional production once the football is already in his hands. That characteristic could become especially valuable if the Rams continue looking for versatile pieces who can operate from multiple alignments. And this is where the broader picture starts coming together. Rather than viewing the room as 5 players fighting for one role, the discussion repeatedly returned to the idea that each tight end may have a distinct purpose. Parkinson appears positioned as a major inline presence. Hybe brings experience and leadership. Allen provides versatility and movement capabilities. Ferguson offers a downfield receiving dimension. Clare enters as a developmental but intriguing piece with alignment flexibility and run-after-catch ability. Suddenly, the question shifts. Instead of asking who wins the tight end battle, perhaps the better question is how all 5 can be incorporated into the offense. That possibility becomes even more interesting when considering the concerns many fans have discussed regarding the wider offensive structure. During the roundtable, attention was drawn to Ferguson and Clare spending significant percentages of their snaps in the slot. Ferguson lined up there approximately 29% of the time, according to calculations mentioned in the discussion. Clare's final collegiate season reportedly featured roughly 33% slot usage. Those figures suggest the Rams could potentially generate offense through tight end versatility rather than relying exclusively on traditional receiver alignments. It is an idea that opens numerous possibilities. Defenses preparing for multiple tight ends may expect power formations and run-heavy looks. Instead, they could encounter players capable of lining up in the slot, moving pre-snap, stretching the field, or creating mismatches against linebackers and safeties. The discussion repeatedly emphasized just how difficult that could become for opposing defenses. And there is another layer to this story. The future workload distribution remains far from settled. One of the biggest debates centered on Tyler Higbee. What role will he play in 2026? Will he immediately reclaim a large portion of the snaps, if healthy? Will the Rams reduce his workload? Will younger players absorb larger responsibilities? Different possibilities were explored. One viewpoint suggested Higbee's experience and seniority naturally position him for significant involvement. Another possibility raised was that the Rams could manage his workload more carefully while allowing younger players to contribute. There was no definitive answer. What became clear, however, is that Higbee remains an important figure within the room. His presence continues to carry weight, both on the field and within the position group itself. At the same time, Parkinson's role generated considerable attention. The discussion repeatedly returned to the belief that Parkinson could remain the primary workhorse among the inline tight ends. Given the snap counts and usage patterns from last season, that projection appears understandable. Allen's future role also generated optimism. Even acknowledging that Higbee's return could reduce some opportunities, there was a strong belief that Allen's versatility gives him a unique pathway to maintaining meaningful playing time. Because of the variety of assignments he handled, he may continue carving out a substantial role regardless of how the rest of the depth chart develops. The more the conversation examined the numbers, the more one theme continued emerging. Versatility. Versatility in alignment. Versatility in responsibilities. Versatility in personnel groupings. And that is precisely where the discussion began heading next. As intriguing as the tight end room already appears on paper, another factor may influence how effective these players become within the offense. That factor is Cliff Kingsbury. The impact of Kingsbury's arrival and the offensive concepts discussed could have significant implications for how these tight ends are deployed and how defenses attempt to respond. The numbers connected to that conversation reveal a potentially fascinating direction for the offense, and they raise even more questions about how opponents will handle these personnel packages once the season begins. What do you think about the Rams' tight end room heading into 2026? Which player do you believe will see the biggest role? Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, Terrence Ferguson, or Max Klare? Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to click on the video on your screen for more Rams coverage, because the latest updates and developments are right here first.